In this video, we're going to talk about relationship building in HR. We all know just how important relationships are. So how do you foster them? How do you grow them? How do you deal with issues? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams and the host of HR Shop Talk. On this show, you get expert insight into all things HR. I encourage you to subscribe to the show or the podcast to keep learning from my smart and experienced guests. Today, I'm talking to Vered Levant. Vered's the founder and president of Vimy HR in Calgary, which is a HR consulting organization. She has to do a lot of relationship building with a lot of people. So I'm looking forward to learning about that from her. Hi, Vered. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Okay, so we're going to talk about relationship building. And in my intro, I talked about just how important it is, and especially important probably in consulting. So can you talk about relationship building in HR in a general sense? How do you think it's different in HR than anywhere?
I think it's harder in HR because you're entering a relationship with a client who is coming to you sometimes because they need to. I remember in my junior years as a new HR practitioner and getting a new client, and it took a really long time to build that relationship. Because you're a newbie, you don't know much, and so building that relationship where you can actually support them was difficult. And there's a level of vulnerability that's required as a leader to be able to grow. And so that's going to take time to actually expose, where are you having difficulty as a leader in terms of like the communication and conversations you're having with your staff, performance management issues.
Right.
I think a lot of leaders understandably struggle with that because it can show that they're not capable or competent. But as we all know, as HR professionals, leadership is the hardest job that you can do. And it's an inside job, really, because you're constantly evolving, learning about yourself. So anyways, my point is that it's such a vulnerable place to be, and there's a lot of trust that's required to be built to have a really good relationship with a client.
That was fascinating. And I think there's actually, for a junior professional, there's a lot of feeling of vulnerability of, well, I don't have any experience. I don't know the answers. And how do I support this leader? And that's before you ever get to the fact that the leader is feeling vulnerable as well. But anyways, do you want to start with this idea around the vulnerability of the HR person and that junior HR person who needs to build a relationship but is not super confident in their own skills?
Yeah, if I could go back in time and tell myself one thing is don't even try to be a know-it-all. You will never know everything in HR. Never.
Amen.
I still don't. I still have so much to learn. I'm learning every day.
Yes.
And being proven wrong. So just let it all go. You will not know everything. Don't be afraid to, if you have a team, leverage them for support when you don't have the answer. Use them as a sounding board when you're working through issues. Being a solo practitioner in HR and running a company is challenging. And actually, a lot of the times my firm supports these solo practitioners and being a sounding board and providing advice because it's such a challenging role.
Yeah.
HR is really challenging, and it is hard to recover. If you do really mess up, if you don't have kind of all that trust built, it's really easy for it to be that relationship to be dismantled.
We could talk about that some more, but I'm just going to move on to the vulnerability of the leader. And you talked about that they might be feeling vulnerable about their leadership approach, and then they're coming to you for advice. How do you build trust in that? And how do you get to the point where they're willing to be vulnerable?
Yeah, you have to have their back. I think some of the feedback that I've received over the years is, I really was so grateful when we had to do that really difficult termination, or when I had to have that really difficult conversation with an employee, and you had my back. You were there to support me and coach me through the conversation and just take care of everything so that we weren't at risk as a company, and that we did it with compassion and empathy.
Mm. I would add in there, that the importance of also just being as prepared as you can, do as much homework as you can, reasonably.
Yeah. And actually, and that's a really good point, because as a leader, that's really what gives them ease, if they feel like we as a team are prepared.
So what are we in HR aiming for in those relationships with our clients? What does a good relationship look like?
A good relationship is one in which you can recover. There's always going to be little things that, drive you crazy about the leader. They should have approached you sooner. And,
yes.
and maybe, you could have done a better job communicating. But I kind of think of it as like, I don't know if you know anything about, or if you read or see videos on Brene Brown and the marble jar.
Yes, the marble jar.
Filling up that marble jar, right?
Yes.
All those little things that pile up to build trust. And it's rare to have the big thing that completely tips over that full marble jar, but it's the little things that really build trust.
Right.
It's fascinating, because you would think as an HR practitioner that'd be the big things, working through that big project, or, bringing all these people in to the organization. But it's actually those little moments where a leader is stressed, or a client is really stressed with a tricky situation, and you are there to support them. That's what I have found has built the relationship. And then they know that you're there for them. And if this happens again, you're going to work with them to get through it.
How do you know when you have a good relationship? How do you measure it? It's like, this is a good one.
I just had another reminder of it earlier this week, when we have an HR professional that we work with one of our clients. She's newer, she's junior. We've worked with this client for a number of years, and they reached out to me for support because it's a tricky situation that they need to deal with in the next 2 weeks. And I have built that level of trust with them, and being competent as well, and dealing with this issue with kid gloves, that they would like me to support them through it. That's when you've built trust.
Right, when they're coming back. With a tricky
and then what I recall too, even when I was sort of in the beginning part of my career, was when a leader wouldn't wait too long to reach out to you for support. They wouldn't hesitate, even if their confidence level had grown over the years. You still became their partner in figuring things out. Right.
I like that. A partner in figuring things out. So, and it's reassuring to someone who's more junior. You don't have to, they have the answers, and they may not even be looking for that, but that you're a partner in figuring it out.
It's really not different from any relationship. The relationship you have with your best friend, or your partner at home in your personal life. It's how quickly do they have that comfort level to just come to you when they're in a bind? Maybe they're embarrassed of the situation that they got themselves in, but they know that you're not going to judge them. Right. They know that you're going to support them through it, and you're going to figure it out together to get the best outcome.
I struggle with that balance between when you need to be non-judgmental and assist that client in resolving their problem, and it builds trust, and we all get ourselves into these binds that poor judgment exercise at some point, versus when you do have to be somewhat judgmental and know that this is wrong, and you really have to, as a leader, kind of say, no, we're going to do it some other way. And I find that balance hard.
Yeah, I just, the way I see it is, if you judge in that moment, it's not helping anything. You're going to have to get out of this situation somehow.
Yeah. So when
you can have the conversation after the fact, going, this could have been a little bit better, like just like you would debrief after you finish the project. What are the learnings here? What could we have done differently? The reality is, like, we are not perfect as HR professionals. We get into our own groove of, because we come across these situations that are a little bit tricky and maybe somewhat emotional. Unfortunately, we become desensitized over the years. We need that feedback too. How could we have supported better communication, education, awareness?
Okay, so steps to building relationships. What are those? How do you go about it?
Oh, I don't know if I could break it down into steps. It's been so long, and it just is ingrained in me that I do it. If I had to think about it and break it down, I think you just have to start off slowly, right? You can't come on strong in any new relationship. So, I think it's just staying curious in the beginning and really asking a lot of questions, getting to know the client, the leader, whatever the situation is, and trying to check in with them.
I would add, and I know I'm not interviewing me, but I would add is when they give you a bigger marble, going back to our marble jaw analogy, and they present you with a bigger marble, you take care of that marble.
Okay.
You do your homework, you're responsive, and you attend to that marble because it's going to fill up a little bit more space in the marble jar.
Yeah. If you address those things, again, going back to another episode, if you address the pain point, you're taking care of that.
Yes.
And absolutely being responsive.
Yeah.
And having integrity. So saying, I'm going to follow up with you on Friday. You better follow up with them on Friday.
If you found this helpful, subscribe to see all the episodes and comment. What have you done that's helped you build relationships? Tell us about that in the comment section. So let's talk about some examples. We talked about a junior person and someone coming out of university, how they might approach it. But what about someone arriving at an organization? They have some experience. What does relationship building look like in that situation?
Yeah, I recall being in that situation and coming in and coming to be the business partner for all these different divisions. And the first thing I did, again, was just really remain curious. And I would actually set up meetings with all the leadership. So getting to know leadership again, very similar to what we do now in our discovery phase, is really understanding where they're at, what's their experience been with HR, with leadership, what are their pain points, what are some challenges that they're having with their current team, what are some areas that they don't feel very strong in that we could support. And that's a starting point.
There were some great tips in there. I mean, I'm going to take away some of those questions and start asking them. So, we're Canadian, and we get quite a few new immigrants, and I've certainly been contacted by new immigrants who want to know how to make a go of it in HR in Canada. So can we talk about the new immigrant HR experience and what's important for a newer immigrant in building relationships with her Canadian or his Canadian clients?
Yeah, I think, again, you don't need to know everything, but I think that the challenge always is for new immigrants maybe they've worked in HR somewhere else, but they actually don't know the employment standards. They don't know the rules around how things work in the Canadian workplace. So that's always the challenge. But in terms of building the relationship, it's no different than the experience that they had before. It's really getting to know the leader, very much similar to what I've talked about in my own experience with relationship building. It's just remaining curious, getting to know them, being responsive, having integrity, and taking care of business.
Right.
How can you make their lives easier? How can you create some ease for that leader who isn't just leading people? They typically are leading a whole function.
That's a good point. Just making it easy. And I do think those things go a long way to building trust and building relationships. Okay, final question here. Can we talk about credibility? It's an important part of relationships and in a context where we're supposed to be providing advice at times. What reflections do you have on credibility in HR and maybe how to go about building credibility?
Again, you won't know everything. You don't know everything in HR. And, for myself, there's always focus areas where I'm more interested and it comes easier for me. But, I get questions about stat holidays sometimes or overtime. I've never been one to memorize employment standards. So I will always say, you know what? I'm just going to look into that and get back to you. So don't ever be afraid to take a moment to gather information, go back to your network, to work through situations before you give the client an answer.
Sometimes I think it's just so frustrating, though, when you never know the answer. They ask you this question and that question and this question. And it's like, I don't know, let me do some research. And I don't know, let me do some research. And I don't know, let me do some research. It's like, can I just know the answer for once? And then you make something up and you make up the wrong thing.
Well, a lot of HR comes with experience. So when it comes to situational questions on how to handle things, I think as you grow in experience, you know what the answer is. Sometimes tricky things pop up and maybe you need to collaborate with a colleague or just use them as a sounding board. But for the most part with employment standards, like, I think I know this, but I just want to confirm. Let me get right back to you.
Yeah. And then get right back to them. Thanks, Farid. Well, there were just some takeaways from that. And I've been in HR a long time. I hope you out there in the audience had some takeaways as well. Thanks for watching and see you next time.